Hi, I'm Jess, and this is going to be a quick demo of my app Lin-guage. At its core, Lin-guage was really developed as kind of a language exploration and kind of toy chest setup for people who are looking to start learning languages but aren't really experts with it yet. You know, they're not linguists or speech pathologists. They know about as much as the average person would. And so to do that, I created three different components to this. There's the explore, compare, and create, and they each kind of grow in complexity as we go. So we'll start with the explore. And this is sort of the entry-level function of this app, which is, it's kind of like a Wikipedia, if you will, for each language, which is just a brief overview of it. So let's click on Japanese. And so every Explore page gives you the same thing for every language, which is the name of the language you picked, and how to say that language in that language. So Japanese is Nihongo, and that's what that says right there. General information as well, so how to say hello in that language, how many native speakers it has, as well as what language family it's from, what part of the world it evolved in other words. Then we have some fun grammar facts, like what writing system it uses, and a brief description of what that means and like the implications of it, as well as morphology, or how words are put together and how grammar is encoded, and then again, a quick definition, since this app is for people who aren't necessarily well-versed in these definitions and words. And then underneath that, there's noun classes and genders. So this is things like Spanish's masculine, feminine, and this shows you how many of those languages, or how many of those genders a language would use. So Japanese uses 0. And if we actually go back and we can look at, let's do German, you'll see that German has 3. It has masculine, feminine, and neutral. And this bottom line right here is kind of quirks that the language have that don't really fit in these other categories, but that might set it apart from other languages, or that are just really good to know if you want to learn it. So like in German, something that's really big but not necessarily common in a lot of languages is that the strict placement of the verb is always second. Verb second in that language no matter what, versus Japanese, it's always in the end. So that's the kind of note that goes right there. And then to the right over here, we have a little sound inventory, and what this box is holding is actually a symbol for every discrete sound in that language, called IPA, is what these are called, International Phonetic Alphabet. And since these are really kind of not common knowledge for what each of these symbols makes, you can actually click on one and hear it. And so if you're like, since this app was built kind of as a gateway into learning a language, if you like what you see and you want to learn the language, you can go ahead and click on this Duolingo app link, and it'll take you to that language's page there. I did one earlier for another language, but it takes you to German because we were just on the German page. And so actually using all this information over here, I wrote an algorithm that can kind of be used to decide what language to learn based on what's easiest. And so what this does is it takes all that information of like language family, writing system, the type of grammar, how many genders it uses or doesn't use, and then it kind of calculates and like transforms those into like kind of points on a plane, if you will, and calculates the distance between two languages, which is just a fancy way of saying it just finds out which languages are the most similar and the most different. And so English to German, they're very similar. That's why they're at the top of this list. Navajo to English is the hardest, and the way that you actually read this is that the native language that you would be starting with is on the left, and then the arrow points to the second language you would be learning. So a native Navajo speaker trying to learn English would have a lot harder time than an English speaker trying to learn German. If you're kind of curious as to why, you can go ahead and click on one of these comparisons, and you'll see a side-by-side of all that information from the Explore page. So it shows you language families. So for Navajo to English, you can actually see that these developed on exact opposite sides of the world. These are Native American language. This is a Native American language, and English developed in Europe. They also have opposite grammar systems. Analytic is kind of when you don't really do a lot of conjugations or like gender marking on words. Polysynthetic is the exact opposite, where you can have an entire sentence basically that's just one word full of like those conjugations. You also see that Navajo has 2 genders, whereas English doesn't in their language. And that you also have to learn like 20 new sounds if you wanted to make that transfer to English. They do use the same alphabet though, so they're not completely different. And that does work for any comparison, and here you see the same information side by side every time. And so those were kind of the basic learning functions, but I thought it'd be great if people could also have a chance to play with them and really kind of get their own way, like become involved with languages and get excited about them like that. And so I created this create functionality, which is when you can mix 2 languages together. So the first thing you do is choose which one you like the sounds of. So that would be like Hawaiian, I think sounds great because it's very vowel heavy. It's very different from English. So I can go ahead and pick that, and then say like I really like German grammar, but I made a mistake, accidentally hit English. I can hit no, and it just resets it real quick for me. So we'll make that decision correctly this time. Hawaiian with the grammar of, let's actually do Swahili. And this generates a completely unique grammar and dictionary for us every time. And so I can make that same exact decision you just saw a million times, and I would never get the exact same thing. And the way this works is that when I pick this, the language I like the sound of, Hawaiian in this case, I get 2 pieces of information in Lin-guage, which is the sound inventory and the syllable structure down here, which is consonant, vowel, vowel for Hawaiian. And then I generate 200 random syllables, and then I send it over so that you can use those to create these words over here on the left side for your dictionary. And then furthermore, any of the grammar things that you need for that specific language. So how you read the dictionary is on the left, you have your English word. In the middle, you kind of have your Latin alphabet version of your generated word, and then you have in here the IPA once again. And so if you kind of want to sound it out, you can always just go over here and hit your sounds. So
Ha, aha.
So you can see that that one's pronounced he. And then we have our grammar things that we needed. So we have pronouns in Hawaiian, or Swahili, my bad. And then we have noun classes and genders. Swahili is kind of unique in the fact that it has 18 noun classes. So those are much more detailed ways of saying that, the noun that I'm talking about is a food, or it's a tool, or it's a person. And so we generate that for you, and we just give you the 9 kind of parent classes rather than the 18 specific ones that they actually use in Swahili. There's also a conjugation table of old verb tenses you might need, so past, present, future, imperfect, kind of the overarching ones. And then some sample sentences down here, which we'll get to in a second. And because a lot of languages are different, there were accounts taken into it, so let's just make Hawaiian again. So we notice with Japanese, we no longer have that big table of the 9 endings with the grammar and gender and classes. We have particles instead, which is Japanese's way of doing that, where you mention not what something is, like if it's a food or a person, but if it's the topic, the subject, if it's being possessed, or if it's a question. And so we get that particle marker there. We also get a different conjugation table for Japanese because Japanese doesn't use present and future, they just use past and non-past. So that is altered for you there. So let's do an actual language. Let's do English mixed with German. You'll notice now that you have noun classes and genders, but not nearly as many as Swahili had. You only have 4 in German. And you also notice that the words are English sounding. We have vowel clusters is what they're called when you have more than one consonant next to each other. And there is a special second algorithm written in that makes sure that these are pronounceable, since there's only so many consonants that can go together in English. And so we get our grammatical cases. Our conjugation table has present and future now that we've picked German again. And then down here we have sample sentences with linguistic glossing. And so what that is basically your generated sentence in the Latin alphabet again, like we saw over here. And then we have the IPA version of it underneath, followed by the basic linguistic gloss, which is where I translate the root of the word and then mark any grammar that's going on top of it, followed by just the sentence written in English. And so for this first sentence right here, we can see that Mary, which is right here, if you can follow my cursor, followed by BLA is marked as nominative. And so we can go up here and we can see that that is indeed the marker for nominative. And then, of course, because this app isn't for people who know what a lot of this means, there's a little breakdown, kind of a crash course in linguistics here on how to use your generated grammar. And so if we don't know what nominative means, we can just go down here and find it in this little snippet right here, which defines it and shows us an example of how it would be used. And as these sentences go on, they get more complex. They're written to show a variety of verb tenses and relationships within the sentence. So it's like, how do we talk about feelings with we're hungry? How do we talk about possession or actions with another person, ownership and origin? And then kind of just like an absolutely crazy sentence down here in terms of grammatical relations with how do you make adjectives work, how do you use terms like how do you make an adverb, all of that stuff. And so there's, again, brief descriptions for these, and it's really used as a way for people to create languages who don't know a lot about language, but to also just be able to get that understanding very quickly. And that's language. Thank you.